and Gabrielle. A love story written by Barron. Narration by Jessica Ann Bogart. Prologue. 6:50 in the morning, spring of 2026, and the war is being fought on the kitchen floor. The general is 4 feet tall. She has 2 puffs in her hair and a look the internet has learned to fear, and she has her father pinned in a game whose rules she invented sometime in the last 90 seconds and revises whenever he gets close to understanding them. He is on his back on the cool tile, a man built out of 16 seasons of professional contact, and he is losing on purpose and losing convincingly, which are 2 different skills, and he has mastered both. "You moved," she says. "That's a foul." "I didn't move." "Daddy." She puts a hand on his chest, flat, the way a referee leans into a man twice his size. "You moved." He surrenders. Surrender is the only winning move in this particular building. The sunlight comes in long and gold across the floor and lays a bar of warm light over the both of them. There is a half-finished puzzle on the counter, 3 days abandoned, fiercely defended against anyone who suggests it be boxed and shelved. The whole house has the particular hum of a place where too many people live and love each other too loudly to ever put anything away. At the table sits the woman the cameras chased for 30 years, and the family chose for love. She has a mug in both hands and is not drinking from it. She is watching the floor, and the watching is the entire morning. Her name is Gabrielle Union. His name is Dwyane Wade. The girl on the floor knows them as the 2 people who come the instant she calls, and that is the only fame that was ever load-bearing. You already know the famous parts, the championships, the films, a wedding nobody could stop photographing. You do not know the long pause in the middle, the hard year nobody would have blamed them for losing, the morning arithmetic of a family with too many shoes by the door. That is the part I mean to tell. This marriage they had to build by hand, board by board, and one of those mornings is happening right now, on a kitchen floor where the greatest guard of his generation has just been whistled for a foul he did not commit and is not going to argue. "Okay," he says. "My ball." "No," says the general. "It's always my ball." Across the room, the woman with the mug laughs, low, into the coffee she still has not tasted, and that laugh is the sound this whole book is trying to explain. Part 1. Before. Chapter 1. Gabrielle, the only one in the room. The gym smells like floor wax and adolescent ambition, and I am 11 years old, and I am the only brown face in a sea of California blonde, and I have approximately 4 seconds to decide who I am going to be. This is Pleasanton. We came here from Omaha when I was small, my family chasing the thing every family chases, which is a wider runway for the children, and the runway they found was sunny and lovely, and almost none of it was mine. So I am standing at the edge of the bleachers, watching a clump of girls decide, in real time, with their eyes, whether I am a person or a punchline. I beat them to it. That is the whole trick, and I learned it before anyone taught it to me. You make the joke first. You crack it before they can crack you. Because a joke is a door you get to open yourself instead of waiting to find out whether anyone is going to open one for you. So I say something. I don't remember the words now, only the physics of it, the way a sharp line goes out across that gym floor and lands, and a couple of the blonde girls laugh despite themselves, surprised into it. And just like that, I am not the new one, the question mark in the doorway. I am the funny one. I have promoted myself, in one sentence, from suspect to host. It works. That is the terrible part. It works so well I run it for 30 years. Be funny first. Be sharp. Be the one they cannot not pick. I built a self that could survive any room on the planet, and nobody warned me that surviving a room and being known in one are not the same skill. They are not even cousins. I would be a genius at the first and starving at the second for a very long time, and I would not notice the hunger, because the only one in the room does not get to look hungry. I became an actress because pretending was already my home address. I'd been performing a polished Gabrielle since the 4th grade, and a camera only felt like the world finally admitting what it had always been. And somewhere in all that booking, I lit a public version of myself so well that even I lost the seam where she ended and I began. Let me put one fact on the record now, before my husband takes his turn and uses it against me. Because he will. I cannot cook. It is a load-bearing beam of this marriage. I once attempted a simple weeknight roast for a house full of people and produced an object the children still refer to, with great solemnity, as the incident, and I have not been permitted near a roasting pan since. But the stove and I signed an armistice long ago, and everyone under this roof has the takeout menus memorized the way other families memorize hymns. What I could not do for the longest time was let anyone all the way in. I kept one chamber of myself zipped shut where no hand could reach, and called that wisdom. There is a man coming who waited me out. I am in no hurry. Neither, it turned out, was he. Chapter 2. Dwyane, the boy from Robbins. The court is at the far end of a hard walk, and the walk is the part nobody films, and the walk is where I did my reel growing up. Robbins, Illinois, and then the south side of Chicago. My grandmother ran the house, and she did not play. You spoke with respect, or you did not speak. You came to the breakfast table on time. You cleared your plate, because the plate would not always be full, and a smart boy understood that early. I learned, young, to go quiet and watch, because watching was how a smaller, younger kid stayed safe in a hard place and found where the floor was before he put his weight on it. I have built an entire life out of that one move. Watch first, move second. It works on a basketball court. It works in a marriage, and it works slowly on a guarded woman's heart, though I did not know that yet. I will be honest about how thin the margins were. There were stretches in there that were neither safe nor soft, and what pulled me out every time was a court at the end of that walk, and a ball that did exactly what I told it when nothing else in my life would obey. Basketball was not a hobby. It was a door, and I knew it was a door the way a drowning man knows where the surface is, and I leaned on it with everything I had. Marquette was the key that turned in that lock. I walked onto that campus, a kid nobody outside Chicago had heard of, and by the time I left, I'd carried a team further than anyone expects a guard from the South Side to carry anything. Then Miami called my name on a draft night in the summer of 2003, and a young man with a great deal to prove walked into the building he would spend the next 16 years rebuilding from the studs. Since she confessed hers, I will confess mine. I am a man celebrated for his hands. People have studied film of my hands, and I cannot, to this day, do a clean part down the middle of a small girl's head of hair. I have watched the tutorials. I have paused them, rewound them, watched a stranger's fingers move with an ease mine refused to learn. My daughter sits between my knees most mornings and supervises the disaster with the patience of a foreman watching an apprentice ruin good lumber, and the part comes out crooked every time, and she keeps me anyway, which is more grace than I have earned in a lifetime of earning things. What I learned slowly over years was that being watched is not the same as being known. I had millions of the first, entire arenas of the first, roaring my name back at me. I was starving for the second, and did not even have the word for what I was starving for. I think now I was waiting for someone specific, and just had not met her yet. Chapter 3. Gabrielle, the thing I survived, and the guard I built. I will tell you the hard thing briefly, the way you'd set a heavy box down quickly so it doesn't strain your back, and then I will tell you what I built out of it, because the building is the part that is mine. At 19, working a summer job, I survived something at gunpoint that no 19-year-old should have to survive. I have spent a good part of my public life since then, standing in front of other women and girls and telling them the sentence I needed someone to tell me, which is that it was not your fault and you are not alone. I have testified. I have written it down. I have said it on stages I would have given a great deal not to have to climb. That is as far into that room as I am going to take you, because the rest of it belongs to me and to the people I've helped. But understand what it did to the architecture. I came out of my young life convinced, all the way down in the footings, that safety was something you poured yourself, alone, and that the smartest woman in any room was the one who had mapped the exits before she sat down. I kept my own money, my own house, my own heart zipped in that sealed compartment where no charming man and no soft goodnight and no grand gesture could get so much as a fingernail to it. I was not bitter. From the outside, strategic and bitter can pass for identical twins, but I was strategic. The joke in my friend group, which I made first, was that I'd drawn up a prenup for my own feelings. Sign here, initial there. Nobody gets the heart in the divorce. Then I married once, young, to a good man, and it ended the way a lot of first marriages end, not from villainy, but from two people discovering they'd become strangers while standing in the same kitchen. And the divorce did not soften my theory of safety. It confirmed it. The exit was wise. Keep the exit. So I built a genuinely good life on my own terms and told myself it was the entire life. I had my friends, the real ones, the ones who drive across a city at midnight and have. I had work I loved, which loved me back unreliably, the way work does. I had a calendar I controlled down to the half hour and a front door that locked from the inside and answered to no one. And if you had told the woman I was then that the person about to walk in and quietly dismantle her careful peace was a soft-spoken shooting guard who did not even drink, I would have laughed in your face and meant every bit of it. The part my friends still tease me about is that I prided myself on reading every room on earth, down to the studs. It was my one true gift. I read that room completely wrong. Chapter 4. Dwyane, the young champion, the single father. There is a hallway behind every arena that the cameras never find, and at 2 a.m. after a road game, I am walking down it with a booster seat in one hand and a sleeping boy on my shoulder. And this is the part of my life that won me nothing and meant the most. It is the strangest stretch a career can hand a man. I won my first championship in Miami and lost my footing at home in almost the same window, and I have never fully untangled how those two things happened to the same man at the same time. The title came in 2006, the hard way, down 2 games to none in the finals and clawing back 4 straight. I was 24, and the basketball world learned my name overnight. And in nearly the same breath, the quiet, private half of my life came apart in my hands. My first marriage ended, and it did not end gently or in private. It ended in courtrooms and headlines and custody hearings, which is a particular flavor of pain, because the whole world gets a vote on the single most private failure of your life. What no one outside the building ever saw was the other version of that famous young man, the one packing 2 lunches in the dark, signing the permission slips, sitting in the parking lot of a school he could not be seen walking into because a crowd would form, watching through the windshield until both his boys got safely through the doors. I made the mornings loud and silly on purpose, so 2 young boys who never asked to have their family rearranged would not lie awake worrying over the exact things keeping me awake 1 room away. I'll tell you the unglamorous truth, the one they don't stitch onto the banner. Winning is loud, and it ends. The confetti is swept up within the hour. Fatherhood is quiet, and it does not end. Not when they're grown. Not when you're old. I was extremely good at the loud thing years before. I was even passable at the quiet one. The one measured in drop-offs and bedtime stories, and 1,000 small logistics that are, I have come to believe, the closest thing this life keeps to infinity. So by the time I walked into a certain crowded party in Miami in the winter of 2007, I was not looking for a leading lady. I was looking for solid ground under my feet. I just did not expect the solid ground to arrive disguised as the funniest woman in the room. Chapter 5. Gabrielle, 30 years of being underestimated. Before I let you into the party, sit with me in a casting office for a second, because the world had a narrow idea of the woman about to walk into that party, and the world was wrong, and the casting office is where the world built the cage. It's the early 2000s. I have a breakout behind me, a cheerleading movie that turned into a genuine cultural phenomenon, the kind of film people still quote back to me in airport terminals, certain they're the first to think of it. And I have just learned exactly what a breakout buys a black actress in this town, which is the right to audition for the same 3 parts for the next 10 years. The best friend, the sharp-tongued sidekick, the woman who exists so the lead has someone to talk to in the second act. I am sitting in a row of chairs outside a casting room, the sides in my hand for the friend again. 4 scenes, 1 good line, and across the row sits a girl up for the lead, and I can see from here that I am better than the part I'm reading, and none of that is going to matter, because the town has decided what I am, and the town does not reconsider. I played those parts well. I played them so well, the town decided that was the entire sum of me. I want to be funny about this, because I am always funny about what hurts, but I'll also be straight. I spent years being the most reliable supporting player in every room and watching leads who could not do what I could do, collect the houses and the magazine covers. I learned to clap for them on the outside and keep score on the inside, in the side pocket, with everything else I wasn't saying. So I built. I refused to keep waiting to be chosen. I produced. I started writing my own scenes down in a notebook. I made a quiet plan to one day stand at the center of my own story on a screen, instead of decorating the margin of someone else's. And years later, I would get exactly that, and executive produce it too, so that no one could ever move me out of the center again. But on the night I'm about to describe, I was still only the funniest, sharpest, most underestimated woman in any given room, with a beautiful house, a guarded heart, and a long memory for every door that had ever shut in my face. I had read every room in Hollywood. I was about to walk into one I could not read at all. Chapter 6. Dwyane, the watcher across the room. The 4th of February, 2007. Super Bowl night, a party in Miami, and I am standing on my side of a room that has, without anyone drawing it, divided itself cleanly into 2 countries. I have heard her tell this story so many times that I've started to remember her version better than my own, which is what happens in a long marriage. Your memories merge, You start keeping them in one account. So let me get my version down before hers takes it over completely. I saw her before we spoke. This will surprise no one, because seeing first is the only move I have ever owned. She was the brightest figure in a bright room, holding court on the far side where the bar was and the music lived. And she was funny in a way that did not need the spotlight to land, which is the rarest funny there is. Most people who are funny are working the room, watching to see if it hit. She was funny the way a fire is warm, without trying, without checking whether anyone noticed. She said something I couldn't hear, and the people around her broke up laughing, and I grinned at it from clear across that floor, and she never once saw me do it. And I made a decision in that moment that tells you everything about how I'm built. I decided not to compete with the music for her attention. I was the quiet man on the far side, exactly as advertised, having my low, unhurried night, and I was not going to perform my way across that room toward her. My game, on the court and off it, has always run on patience. Let the play develop. Don't force the shot. The shot comes to the man willing to wait for it. I've been asked many times why I waited, and my honest answer is deeply unromantic. We were both coming out of marriages, both had real wreckage to clear, children in my case, grief in both. I did not want to build the most important relationship of my life on a foundation that was still on fire. People think patience is a romantic quality. It is not. Patience is just respect wearing work boots, doing the part nobody claps for. I watched her across that room and thought, not yet. And being able to think not yet when everything in you wants now is the only discipline I ever truly trusted in myself. Chapter 7. Gabrielle, the night of the two sides of the room. The party was mine as much as his, which is the first thing nobody believes. February in Miami, the air thick enough to chew, 200 people I half knew pressed into a room that thumped under my heels. I had a drink sweating in my hand and my people around me, holding court on my side of it like a woman who had already decided the night held nothing she needed. He was on the other side. You could draw a line down the middle of that room and label the two countries. My side had the bar. His side had a circle of folks leaning in close to hear him over the bass, and he was drinking nothing at all. This kid with a quiet mouth and a stillness that didn't match the noise. Somebody at my elbow said that's Dwyane, the heat guard, and I did the math out loud, because I am not a kind woman before midnight. Athlete, divorcing, baby-faced, 25 to my 34. I said something cruel and funny, and my people laughed, and I went back to my drink, and that should have been the whole of it. Except I looked again, and he was already looking. Not the way men look, not the up and down inventory I'd spent a career learning to feel from across a room. He just held it, one beat too long to be an accident, and one beat too short to be a move, and then he tipped his chin like I see you doing the math, and went back to his circle. I hate being read. I went over there to win. They told me you're hosting this, I said. You don't drink, you don't dance, you're running a Bible study in the corner. What are you hosting? He didn't flinch. Conversation, he said. Same as you, you're just charging more for yours. That landed somewhere I wasn't guarding. I laughed before I chose to. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, the kind that feels like 2 and reads back later like an hour. He asked me questions, and then, the truly disorienting part, he listened to the answers, which men in that town did approximately never. I gave him the polished version, the funny version, the untouchable version, and he took each one with that patient courtside stillness, like he knew the real shot would come if he just didn't bite on the fake. I went home and called my friends and entered my verdict before I could feel anything underneath it. Not my type, I said. Too quiet, too settled. I'd built an entire life out of charming and complicated and unavailable, and here sat the exact opposite of all three, calm in the middle of a loud room, needing nothing from anyone, least of all me. Reader, that is never the end of the thought. I filed him under not for me, which I have since learned is the precise drawer where the important ones always hide. If I ever tell you a man is not my type, alert his family. Start the wedding fund. I have a perfect record of being wrong about it exactly once. It cost me my entire careful peace, and it was the best deal I ever made. Part 2. The Long Pause. Chapter 8. Dwyane. 2 championships and a man learning to wait. Empty gym. 6 a.m. The lights buzzing on one bank at a time, and I am shooting free throws alone, because this is where I do my actual thinking, and what I'm thinking about, in the strangest stretch a career ever handed me, is how to share. People who know the basketball want to know what I was doing in the in-between years, the gap between the party and the day we truly began. And the answer is that I was learning the hardest skill of my professional life, which had nothing to do with scoring. After that first title, I got hurt. The way a body that plays the way I played eventually always gets hurt. Then the team made a bold and deeply unpopular move. In the summer of 2010, 2 other stars came to Miami, and overnight the quiet shooting guard was sharing his house with the biggest name in the sport and a 3rd all-star. And the basketball world had a loud opinion about every inch of it, most of those opinions unkind. I remember standing in that same empty gym after the announcement, ball on my hip, feeling the thing nobody talks about, which is that this was my building. I had bled in it for 7 years, and now I was going to have to hand somebody else the last shot. Not lend it, hand it. And a younger version of me would have fought that with everything he had. We lost in the finals the first year, in front of everybody, and I learned what it tastes like to be the most talked about failure in your profession. Then we won, in 2012, and again in 2013, back-to-back, 4 straight trips to the finals, the kind of run that hangs a man's number from a ceiling someday. I will not pretend I wasn't proud. I had given all of my body to that building. But here's what I want you to hold, because it matters to this love story and not to the box score. In the exact years I was learning to share the loud thing, to pass the last shot, I was also, slowly, off the court, becoming a man who could share the quiet thing, a man who could wait. The championships taught the world I could win. Those years taught me I could yield. One of those lessons mattered more, and it was not the one with the parade. Chapter 9. Gabrielle, 3 years of almost. He is sitting on a curb outside a tutoring center, a celebrated professional athlete, sketching a homework schedule on the back of a parking receipt, while he waits for a kid who ran late. And I am standing 6 feet away, pretending to check my phone, and I am, against every rule I have ever written for myself, undone. What people forget about us, what gets lost in the gowns and the highlight reels, is the gap. We met in 2007 and did not truly begin until around 2010, 3 years. A long, slow, unglamorous pause in which we did the most important and least photographable thing 2 people can do, which is that we became friends, real ones, the kind who tell each other the unflattering truth and survive the telling. That curb is the whole thing in miniature. He's not performing the homework schedule for me. He doesn't even fully know I'm watching. He's just a man being quietly, competently good at an unsexy Tuesday chore, and it disarms me in a way no grand gesture ever could. Grand gestures I can defend against. I have no defense at all for a man sketching out a math schedule on a receipt and meaning it. "You missed your calling," I told him, nodding at the receipt. "Substitute teacher." "Pays better than my last job," he said, not looking up, and I laughed, and he allowed himself a small private smile at having gotten me. I kept my sealed compartment. I kept my exit mapped, my money mine, my heart zipped. But I started noticing something I couldn't explain away, which was that I was telling him the true version of my days instead of the lacquered one. The bad audition, the petty jealousy, the fear. Usually at his kitchen table while the children's homework spread out around us, and somebody asked me, every single time, to settle an argument about whether a word counted in their spelling list. For a woman who'd built a career and a self out of Polish, that was the tell. That was the confession, slipping out, and I didn't even know I was making it. My friends saw it before I'd say it out loud. One of them looked at me across a dinner, very dry. Fork paused halfway and said, "You've stopped performing around him." I argued hard. She just let me argue the way you let a kid insist they're not tired right before they fall asleep mid-sentence. She was right. I hate when that happens, and it happens to me with a frequency I find personally insulting. Chapter 10. Dwyane, going public, and the math of a blended life. A long table, a weeknight, textbooks everywhere, and the most famous actress I know is sitting cross-legged in the middle of my son's homework, refereeing a fight about whose turn it is to pick the show, and nobody is photographing it. And that is the exact moment I knew. By 2010, we stopped pretending, first to ourselves and then to the cameras, and we stepped out together at a charity event that summer, which is as close to an announcement as a man like me ever gets. The watchful man had finally made his move, and the move was simply to stop hiding it. Falling for her was the easy part. Falling is always the easy part. The complicated part, the part that would have scared off most people, was that I did not come alone. I came with sons, a custody calendar, a basketball season stacked on top of a family, 2 full-time, non-negotiable lives balanced one on the other. A lot of people say they want a partner, and what they actually want is an audience, somebody to watch them be wonderful. She was not that, not for a single day. So picture the table. One boy is stuck on a math problem and getting frustrated. The other is narrating an imaginary basketball game to no one in particular, full play-by-play, crowd noise included. And there in the middle is the woman from the magazine covers, helping with fractions she swears she's forgotten, refereeing the show argument, ordering dinner with one thumb. "That's not how you carry the one," the older boy told her, exasperated. "It absolutely is how you carry the one," she said. "And the fact that you think it isn't is why I'm ordering extra fries for myself and not for the disrespectful." He laughed despite himself and got the problem, and she pretended not to notice she'd just taught it to him, which is the only way that age accepts being taught anything. No cameras anywhere. That was the audition I didn't know I was running, and she passed it without ever knowing it was happening, which is the only way anybody ever passes the real ones. Part 3. Building. Chapter 11. Gabrielle. The year it almost ended. I am standing in a hallway, with my hand flat against the cool of the wall, and the exit I spent a lifetime building is right there, exactly where I left it, and every instinct I own is telling me to walk through it. I will not skip the hard part, because skipping it would be a lie, and this family does not tell those anymore. We earn the right to be honest the expensive way, which is the only way anybody earns it. There was a break in our road. We separated for a stretch, and during that stretch, the most painful and most public chapter of our entire story unfolded, and a child, a son named Xavier, came into the world. I have written about my own grief from that season in my own words, in my own book, slowly and carefully, and on my own terms, and I am not going to relitigate that private pain here, for anybody's entertainment. There was nothing funny in it. I am a woman who has used the joke as a life raft since the 4th grade, and I never once found the joke in that year, and I will not invent one now. What I will tell you is the part that is mine, the part about that hallway and that wall. The sealed compartment was right there. The mapped road out was clear. Every instinct I'd built since I was 19 was screaming the old gospel at me, which is that safety is a thing you guard alone, and the woman who walks away first is the woman who wins. I could feel the old self standing just behind me, hand out, saying, "Come on, this is the part we're good at. Let's go." And I stood in that hallway and did the math the old self could not do. I learned, with my hand on that wall, that the exit I'd spent a lifetime building was not safety at all. It was only solitude wearing a nicer name. Leaving would have protected the old version of me. Staying and doing the brutal, unglamorous labor of repair was the only road that led to the life I actually wanted. The loud, imperfect, crowded one, full of people who would notice if I were gone and miss me out loud. We chose, both of us, separately and then together, to walk back toward each other on purpose, eyes wide open, knowing exactly what it had already cost. Anyone can fall in love. Falling is gravity. Staying is engineering. And I took my hand off the wall, and I did not walk through the door. And that is the whole chapter. Chapter 12. Dwyane, what I could not fix and what I could. I am standing in my own living room, in my own house, and I am more afraid than I have ever been in any arena in my life. And the reason is that there is nothing to do with my hands. I am built to repair what breaks. That is the athlete in me, bone deep. Find the problem, study the film of the problem, drill it until your hands bleed, beat it. That method built my entire career, and in that hardest year it was completely, uselessly worthless, because the wreckage in front of us was not a problem you could outwork. I had wounded the most important relationship in my life, and there was no drill for that, no film session, no extra hour in the gym that would erase it. So I stood in that room and did the 2 hardest things a man like me can do. I told the truth, fully, with no spin and no defense. And then I stayed in the room while she decided what that truth was worth. That second part. I have taken the final shot in a building full of strangers, screaming for me to miss, and standing in our own living room waiting to learn whether she would stay was harder than any shot I ever took, because this time I had earned the doubt. There was just the quiet, and her face deciding, and me holding still inside the longest silence of my life, resisting the lifelong urge to fill it, to fix it, to make a play, because there was no play to make. There was only the staying. She stayed, not because I deserved it in that moment. She stayed because we both decided on purpose that what we were building was worth more than what we'd broken, and because she is, underneath all that armor, the bravest person I have ever shared a life with. The watchful man had spent his whole life proud of his patience. That year I learned patience is the easy virtue. The hard one is humility, and she taught it to me across our own table, and I have tried to be worth the lesson every day since. Chapter 13. Gabrielle, becoming the lead at last. There is a moment on a set, after they call action, when the entire frame belongs to one person, and for the first time in my professional life, that person is me. Dead center, no one to hand the scene off to, and I have to keep myself from laughing out loud at the strangeness of it. In the middle of everything, my professional life finally did what I'd been quietly building toward for over a decade. I got to be the lead, not the best friend, not the sidekick, not the woman in the doorway with one good line. The lead, the center of the frame, in a drama about a complicated, accomplished, messy, fully human black woman, the kind of character the town had never once offered me. And I did not merely star in it, I produced it. I made certain my name sat on the part of the call sheet where the decisions get made, because I'd spent too many years clapping for leads who could not do what I could do. If they would not hand me the room, I would build the room and stand in the middle of it myself. I tell you this here, in the middle of the love story, because the two arrivals are the same shape. In my work and in my marriage at the very same time, I was learning to stop performing the polished version and start standing, undefended, in the center of the real one. The woman who survived every room by being the funniest one in it was, slowly, in her 40s, learning to be the most honest one instead. That is a harder act. It gets you a life. I went home the night we wrapped a particularly hard scene, the kind that takes something out of you, and he looked up from whatever he was reading and said, "How was the center of the frame?" Not a big speech, but he knew exactly what that frame meant, because he'd spent his own life learning the difference between being looked at and being seen, and he was the only person in my life who'd have asked the question that precisely. Chapter 14. Dwyane, the question on the 21st of December. The 21st of December, 2013, and the famous hands, the ones they study on film, the ones that never shook with a championship on the line, are shaking over a small box like a rookie's at the free throw line in the final seconds of his first real game. I am a man who has taken the last shot of a championship season in a building of 40,000 screaming strangers, and I'll tell you the plain truth, which is that asking her was harder, because this time I actually desperately cared whether it went in. There was no version of this where I shrugged off the miss. This was the whole game. I did not want a stadium for it. No jumbotron, no crowd, no viral moment. I wanted her to know that the watchful man had seen all of it. The bright side of the loud room. The 3 years of almost. The hard year we just survived. The side pocket she still kept for emergencies, that I had finally stopped trying to talk her out of. I was not asking the leading lady the world had finally let her become. I was asking my friend, the one who tells me the true version of the day, the one who walked into my complicated, crowded life and decided to stay in it before I'd given her a single reason a sensible person would accept. I got the words out. I don't remember them now, only the shaking and the way the room went very quiet and very large. She said yes, and then, immediately, before the yes had even finished landing, she made a joke, cracked wise right over the open ring box to cut the size of the moment down to something she could survive, because that is her oldest reflex. The make the joke first reflex she's had since she was a girl with no one like her in the room. It took me years to learn how to read that joke. I can read it now. When something matters to her too much, when it's too big to hold, she reaches for the joke the way another person reaches for a hand. So when she cracked wise over that ring box with her eyes brimming, I heard what she was really saying underneath it, the line she finds almost impossible to say plainly. I love you. Do not make me say it without a joke. And I didn't. I never will. Chapter 15. Gabrielle, the 30th of August. The music starts, and one of his sons takes my arm to walk me partway down the aisle, and the face I have kept perfectly still through 1,000 auditions and 10,000 rooms simply gives up, completely, in front of 300 witnesses. We married on the 30th of August 2014 at a place called Chateau Artisan outside Miami, in front of around 300 people who'd watched some version of this story unfold in public for years and very much wanted to see how it kept going. There was a tall, ridiculous, gorgeous cake and a guest list that read like an awards show. There were the tears I had sworn, repeatedly, to several people, that I would not produce, and that I produced immediately and without dignity the second the music started. But the detail that truly undid me, the one I was not braced for, was the boy at my arm. One of his sons walked me partway down that aisle. Think about what that means. By the time we stood up in front of all those people to make it official, we were not merging two separate, tidy lives. We were ratifying a family that already shared homework arguments and inside jokes and a long-running debate about whose turn it was to choose the music in the car. The paperwork was simply catching up to a truth that had been settled for a while. On every ordinary day, none of those 300 guests had been there to see. "You good?" the boy murmured, because my hand had tightened on his arm. "No," I said, laughing and ruined at the same time. "Absolutely not. Keep walking." I had spent my entire life as the outsider in every room, and I looked up that day through a face I had wholly lost control of, and the room was full, wall to wall, of people who were mine. Not an audience. Mine. The guarded woman had no idea what to do with that, so she did the one move she knows when something grows too big to hold, which is that she cried and laughed at the exact same instant, which is, for the permanent record, my entire personality compressed into a single gesture. Chapter 16. Dwyane, a family of many, and the arithmetic of love. 7 in the morning, and there are too many shoes by the door, in too many sizes, and 3 different people are about to swear they own the same gray hoodie, and I am standing in the middle of it, with a comb in my hand, and I have never been happier in my life. People love a tidy family, the matching holiday card, the coordinated outfits, the clean little unit of mother and father and 2.5 children that fits in a frame. Ours is not that, and I have stopped apologizing for it. Some things in a life you do not solve, you love them in their unsolved state. Let me do the arithmetic out loud, because the arithmetic is the love. There are my older sons, Zaya and Zaya, who I share with their mother. There is Xavier, my son, who does not live under our roof, but who is mine and is loved. There is my nephew, Dwyane, who I helped raise and stand as guardian for. Because in the family I come from, when a child needs a steady house, you make your house steady, and you do not make a speech about it. There is the daughter who would arrive later and bend the whole gravity of the place around her. And there is a wife who took on every bit of this with a fierceness the public, who only ever saw the gowns and the premieres, consistently and badly underestimated. This particular morning, the gray hoodie tribunal is in full session at the door. 3 kids and 3 competing claims and 0 physical evidence. And from the kitchen, my wife delivers the ruling without looking up from her phone. It's nobody's. It's mine now. I'm confiscating contested property. The hoodie goes over the back of her chair like a flag planted on a hill, and the kids scatter laughing, and the day starts. I cannot braid. I have established this thoroughly. But I learned anyway. At the counter on 100 slow mornings, a tutorial paused on a phone propped against the sugar bowl. because love is not a feeling you have while sitting still. Love is a verb you conjugate badly at first, on a weeknight, with a comb in your hand and an impatient head squirming in front of you. I have a wall crowded with trophies that strangers voted on, and not one of them means what it means to have a small, skeptical person trust me with her hair every single morning, even though we both know I'm going to get it wrong. It belongs in a hall of fame more than anything that already wears my name. Part 4. Staying. Chapter 17. Gabrielle, telling the truth on paper. It's late, and the house is asleep, and I am at the kitchen table with a manuscript in front of me. And my husband walks in for a glass of water and sees the pages and stops. And I watch his whole face decide whether to ask, because there are parts about us in there, and we both know it. In the fall of 2017, I published a book of essays, and it became a bestseller, and here's the real reason it connected. It was not the celebrity. People do not buy a book in those numbers because a famous person wrote it. They buy it because they recognize themselves in it, and the reason they recognize themselves is that I had, after a lifetime of polish, finally stopped performing on the page. I wrote about the gymnasium and the only one in the room years, about what I survived at 19 and the advocacy I built out of the rubble. And I wrote, for the first time in public, about the years we tried to have a child and could not, the rounds of treatment that take over your calendar and your body and your hope all at once, the losses, more of them than I had ever said out loud, that I'd carried in private while smiling on red carpets, because smiling through it is a particular athletic event women are simply expected to medal in with no training at all. That night at the table, he didn't ask. He picked up the pages, sat down across from me, and read the whole thing. In one sitting, at the end of a long day, his water going warm and forgotten at his elbow. I watched him over the top of my laptop the entire time, bracing for the flinch at the parts about us, the small protective recoil, the request to soften this, cut that. He didn't flinch. He read the last page, set the stack down, square, the way he sets everything down, and was quiet for a long minute, the way he goes quiet when something has landed all the way in. "I'm proud of you," he said. 3 words. He is not a man who wastes words, so when he spends them, you can take them to the bank. I have kept those 3. I keep them in the place where I used to keep the exit. Chapter 18. Dwyane, the long wait for the littlest one. A waiting room with bad magazines and a clock that does not move, and I am a man who has never in his life been good at sitting still, and I am learning, the slowest and hardest way, that there is nothing here to fix. The hardest seasons of our marriage were never the loud public ones. The public ones, as much as they hurt, at least came with a script. Everybody knew their lines. The truly hard seasons were the silent ones, the quiet bathrooms, the waiting rooms, the hope that kept getting handed back to us again and again, unopened, undamaged, useless. I am built to repair what breaks, and there is no out-training a wall that does not respond to effort, no film to study, no halftime adjustment, no last shot I could take to change the outcome. And for a man whose whole identity rested on delivering in the clutch, that helplessness was a wilderness I had no map for. So I learned the one move that was truly mine to make, which was to be there, not to fix it, to hold it. There were nights she could not carry the hope, and I carried it for the both of us. There were nights I could not carry it, and she carried it for me. That is the part no one tells you about a real marriage. It is not 2 strong people standing side by side at all hours. It is 2 people trading turns at being the strong one, passing the hope back and forth between them like the last warm thing in the house, making sure it never once touches the floor. When we eventually made the decision that would bring our daughter to us, through a surrogate, after everything, we made it the way we now make every important matter, together, on purpose, with our eyes wide open and no illusions left. We had run out of the easy kind of hope, the kind you're born with. What we had instead was the hard kind, the kind you build by hand out of the wreckage of the easy kind, and it turned out to be stronger. Chapter 19. Gabrielle, the arrival of the shady baby. She is hours old, and someone holds up a phone, and there it is, the first photograph, a brand new human being regarding the entire world with an expression of total, regal, withering skepticism. And I start laughing through tears in a hospital bed, because she is exactly, unmistakably ours. Our daughter, Kaavia James, arrived in November of 2018, and from that very first photograph she wore, a look the entire internet fell instantly and permanently in love with. The world decided she was hilarious before she could hold up her own head, and gave her a nickname for that look. She has more than earned it every day since. Let me tell you the truth about that first stretch, because it is more complicated than the joy. We had waited so long and lost so much along the way that I almost did not trust the happiness when it finally arrived. The guarded woman, the one with the mapped exit and the zipped side pocket, wanted to keep one hand on the door even then, even with a miracle in the other arm. It is a terrible reflex to withhold yourself from the very life you wanted most, and it does not simply evaporate because the miracle has arrived. But here is what I learned in the first month of her life, and it remade me. You cannot keep one hand on the exit and hold a baby at the same time. The baby demands both hands and all of your attention and the entire undefended heart. And so, for the first time in my life, I let go of the door. I put both palms on the actual living person in front of me. I am still doing it. I will do it for the rest of my life, and I have never once missed the door. She is, for the record, the funniest person in our house, which is a genuinely fierce competition with a long bench of contenders. She insists, every morning, on her own miniature mug of pretend coffee, poured with great ceremony, because she has watched her parents do exactly that and intends to be taken every bit as seriously. Her pajamas never match, on purpose, and not one bit of it gets corrected, because the imperfect, unframeable version of every single morning is the one that is, at last, completely ours. Chapter 20. Dwyane, standing where a father stands. A kid is sitting in front of me telling me, in 4 plain words, exactly who she is. And she is watching my face the way I have watched everything my entire life, scanning for the flicker, and I have about 4 seconds to discover what I actually believe. I need to tell you about my child Zaya, and I need to tell it carefully, because it is the proudest part of my life, and it is not mine to dramatize. It is hers. I am only the father who got the honor of standing next to it. In the early part of 2020, our family told the world, out loud, a truth we had already been living quietly at home for a while, which is that my daughter Zaya is exactly, precisely, who she has always known herself to be. We did not discover her. She told us who she was, the way children tell you the truth before they learn to be afraid of it, and our only job was to listen, and then to stand in front of her. There was no time in those 4 seconds to consult anyone, no defense to set, no film to study, no patient courtside read. There was only a kid in front of me, and her face and the choice underneath it. And the honest answer is that it was not hard at all, because her mother and I had spent a decade learning to put a person ahead of being right, and this was only the final exam of a class we'd already been taking for years. I have been cheered by millions of strangers for putting a ball through a hoop, and I am telling you, with my whole chest, that I am prouder of standing publicly beside my daughter as she became herself than of every championship and every banner stitched with my number, and it is not remotely close. One of those honors made me famous. The other made me a father in the only way that counts. People asked me, plenty of them, whether it was hard. The love was not hard. The love was the easiest breath I have ever drawn. What was hard was the noise, the strangers with opinions about my own child, the people who wanted to stage a public argument over a private little person who only wanted to be herself in her own house. And to every bit of that, I had exactly one response. A father's job has one line in it: love your kids and protect them out loud, not quietly. Out loud, where it costs you something, where the whole world can read exactly where you stand, so your child never, ever has to wonder. My wife stood right there beside me, shoulder to shoulder, the way she'd learned my children years earlier over fractions and spelling lists. We laugh easily in this house. About this, we have never once joked, and we are not going to start. Chapter 21. Gabrielle, the bonus mom, and a love I did not give birth to. 2 a.m, a small voice at the side of the bed, a bad dream, and the child standing there in the dark did not come from my body and is reaching for me anyway. And I get up, because that is what mine means, and every one of them is mine. I want to say something about loving children you did not give birth to, because the world has a cold, dismissive word for it: step, and the word does not come close. I came into this family a grown woman with a guarded heart and a mapped exit, and I inherited all at once a house full of children already wholly formed by another mother and a hard history. I could have stood at the edge of that. A lot of people in my position do. They love the man and tolerate the children and call it generosity. The old version of me, the strategic one, might have done exactly that. Kept a little distance, kept the side pocket, stayed a guest in my own family. But somewhere over the fractions and the carpool and the 10,000 ordinary weeknights, I stopped being a guest. I learned these children, not because anyone required it of me, but because I could not help it. Because love, it turns out, is not a finite ration you dole out only to the people who share your blood. It expands to fill whatever room you're brave enough to unlock. They are entirely, ferociously mine, and I will fight anyone who hangs an asterisk on that. The little machinery of an ordinary day is where that love truly lives, not in the gowns. In the ride to practice and the wrong answer talked through gently, and the bad dream at 2 a.m, and the school project due tomorrow that nobody mentioned until tonight. That is the cathedral. I got up for that 2 a.m. bad dream and walked a small shaking person back to bed and sat on the floor beside it until the breathing went slow and even. And somewhere in the dark I understood that I had become a thing I'd spent my whole life too guarded to be, which is reachable in the middle of the night by a child who is certain I will come. You cannot guard your way into belonging. You have to set the armor down and walk in. Part 5. The Long Game. Chapter 22. Dwyane. One last dance. Final buzzer. Last game, my building in Miami, and a man I spent a decade trying to beat walks across the floor through the noise, pulls his jersey over his head and holds it out to me, and his eyes are wet, and neither of us says the thing out loud. Every athlete eventually faces the one opponent he cannot beat, which is time, and in the spring of 2019 I faced mine on purpose, out loud, with my family in the building. I called my final season One Last Dance, and I toured the league saying goodbye to arenas I'd spent 16 years competing in, players I had battled, men who'd spent 10 years trying to take what was mine, came up after the final buzzer and asked to trade jerseys, the way you do when the respect runs all the way down. Grown men, fierce competitors, lining up to say, without the words, I saw you, I'll remember you. But the moment I carry isn't the jersey swaps. It's looking up from the floor in that last game and finding my family in the seats. My sons, my nephew, my wife, who has a famous face she could no more keep still that night than she could at our wedding. And I understood, standing on that floor for the last time as a player, that what I was walking away from was the easy part of my life, the part I was always good at, and what I was walking toward, full time now, was the hard part, the quiet part, the part that comes with no banner. I drove home that night. One kid was already asleep. Another was waiting up to tell me about something that had nothing to do with basketball, some small drama from a regular day, and I sat on the edge of his bed in my game clothes and listened to all of it, every detail. They will tell you I retired with the records and the all-star nods and the legacy, and all of that is true. But the truest sentence I can say about that night is smaller than any of it. I was, for the first time in my adult life, only a man coming home at the end of a day, just a father at a bedside in the dark, which is the best thing I have ever been allowed to be. Chapter 23. Gabrielle, watching a great man let go of the loud thing. I am sitting courtside, close enough to read his hands, watching the one man the whole world thinks it knows do the bravest thing I have ever seen him do, which is walk away from the only stage that ever fully held his name, and I am braced for him to break. And he does not break. The world worries about athletes when they retire, and the world is right to. So much of who they are is wrapped up in the loud thing, the cheering, the nightly referendum on whether they're still great, and a lot of them are lost when it stops. Because the cheering was holding up the entire structure of the self. I braced for that. I was ready to hold the hope through the grief of letting go. And here is what I learned, watching him do it. He was not lost, because he had spent the back half of his career quietly building a self that did not depend on the cheering at all. While the world watched him learn to share the ball with other stars, I watched him, at home, learn to need the noise less and need us more. By the time the cheering stopped, he had already moved the foundation of himself off the court and into the house, into the parent-teacher conferences and the late-night talks and the braid he cannot finish. And so when the loud thing ended, he did not collapse. He simply came home. I caught his eye from courtside in those last minutes, and he gave me this small, private look, the one that means, I'm okay, I promise. And I realized he was reassuring me. On the last night of his career, in front of an arena losing its mind, because he could read across that whole loud building that I was the one who needed steadying. That is who I married. So watching a man dismantle the self he'd built out of being seen, on purpose, and rebuild himself out of being known instead, in private, with no applause for the labor, is the most attractive thing I have ever witnessed. The entire world fell for the player. I fell for the man who knew he was more than the player and quietly made it true before he ever needed it to be. Chapter 24. Dwyane, the rafters, and the speech. A podium. the entire basketball world in front of me, my number already hanging in the rafters of the building behind me. And I make a couple of nervous jokes the way I always do, and then I set the jokes down and tell the only truth worth standing up there for. In 2020, the team raised my number to the rafters of that arena, where it will hang long after I'm gone. In 2023, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the highest honor my sport can hand a person. And in 2025, they put me in a second time as part of the Olympic team that won gold for our country. 3 of the loudest honors a basketball life can hold, all in a handful of years. I am proud of all of it. I will not pretend to a false humility I do not feel. The boy from Robbins who learned to go quiet and watch earned every one of those banners, and I let myself feel that for one full breath. And then I told the truth. The loud honors are the easy part, the part the world can see and measure and rank. The hard part, the part with no banner and no ballot, is the quiet life. It is being a present father to a complicated, blended, beautiful house full of kids. It is being a real husband to a woman who spent her entire life poised to leave any room and learning, slowly, to become a room she finally wanted to stay in. I found her face in that crowd while I said it. She was not keeping it still. The banners say I could win. The marriage says I could yield. The first made me famous. The second made me whole. And they only hand out trophies for the first. Chapter 25. Gabrielle. 2 people building empires at the same kitchen table. 2 laptops open at one long table. Late, the house finally quiet. And he reads me a line off his screen and asks if it's any good. And I read him a line off mine and ask the same. And this, the side-by-side building, is the part of the marriage no magazine ever caught. People assume that when 2 ambitious, accomplished people marry, somebody's ambition has to go quiet so the other one can be loud. One career in the front seat, one in the trunk. We refuse that arrangement completely. From the very beginning, I kept building. After the lead role I'd waited my entire career for, I kept producing, kept writing, kept turning my name into a company instead of merely a credit, because I'd learned the hard way that the surest way to guarantee a Black woman a seat at the center of the story is to own the table she's sitting at. And he built 2. He turned that same watchful, study-the-film patience on the business world and built an entire second life out of it. Ownership stakes in teams, ventures with the teammates he'd bled beside, a production company. So picture us at that table at midnight, the famous actress and the retired champion, 2 screens glowing, each of us deep in our own venture, occasionally looking up to read the other a line and ask, "Is this good? Tell me the truth." And he tells me the truth, and I tell him the truth. We did not shrink to fit each other. When his ambition needed room, I made room. When mine needed room, he made room. And somehow, the room only ever got bigger. That is the whole trick, and almost nobody manages it. Chapter 26. Dwyane, who you are when the cheering stops. She's across the room pretending to read, keeping half an ear on whether I'm about to say something she'll want to argue with. And I'm thinking about the question that comes for every man who was ever great at one loud thing. The question that arrives in the quiet after, which is simply, who are you now? For a lot of men, the answer is a wound. They were the work they did, and when they stop doing it, a stranger turns up in the mirror. I was determined it would not happen to me, and the reason it did not is sitting 8 feet away from me right now with a book she is not reading. Here's the secret I worked out somewhere in the back half of my career. I am not, and never was, only the work I did on the floor. I am the boy who learned to watch first, because watching kept him safe. I am the young father who learned every domestic skill nobody had ever expected of him, so his sons would never doubt they were tended. I am the husband who learned the difference between being seen by millions and being known by a few. None of that needed an arena. All of it survives the final buzzer. "You're staring," she says, not looking up from the book. "I'm watching," I say. "Different thing." She says, the sound she makes when she's decided to let me win one, and she turns a page she hasn't read, and I go back to being a man who knows exactly who he is. So when the cheering stopped, I never had to ask. The man in the mirror after the game is the same man, only at last undistracted. I get to give all of that man to the people at home now, instead of the leftovers after a road trip. That is not a downgrade from the loud life. That is the upgrade I spent the loud life working toward, and I would not trade one ordinary morning of it for one more banner. Part 6. Up Close. Chapter 27. Gabrielle, the year I needed to be held. The phone rings before dawn in 2024 with the news about my father, and grief walks straight through the front wall of the fortress I spent 40 years building, past the armor and the side pocket and the mapped exit, as if none of it were even there, as if I'd built the whole thing out of a rumor. Here is what that taught me, because it is the entire point of what we built. The woman who engineered a self that could survive any room on earth could not survive that one room alone. The funny one, the sharp one, the one who makes the joke first, had no joke for this, and for the first time since the gymnasium in Pleasanton, the strategy failed outright. There was only the raw, unmanageable fact of it, and a woman who had no tools for being helped, because I'd spent a lifetime perfecting the art of not needing to be. And I did not survive it alone. The watchful man did not try to fix it, because he'd learned, in the waiting rooms years before, that grief is not a problem you solve. He simply moved closer. He held the hope when I could not. He ran the quiet machinery of every ordinary day, fielded the calls and the casseroles, and the kind strangers at the door, and kept the children laughing in the next room so the house would not go silent, because he knows a silent house is the most dangerous place a grieving person can stand. That first morning, I could not get up. I lay there with the weight of it on my chest like a stone, and from the next room I heard the small, fierce voice of my daughter narrating my whole grieving morning like a tiny sportscaster, telling her father, in detail, that Mommy was still in the bed, and Mommy needed coffee, and she herself would supervise. And he let her, because he understood that on that exact morning the most healing sound in the world was a 4-year-old refusing to let the house go quiet. I spent my young life keeping an exit from every room and a sealed compartment on every feeling, and somewhere in this marriage I stopped reaching for either one. I traded the exit for a chair I never want to leave, and a husband who tastes the soup before he seasons it, and a daughter who decided I needed company. Even on the worst morning of my life, somebody was being silly in the next room, and the day began anyway, which is, I have decided, as near to grace as an ordinary life ever comes. Chapter 28. Dwyane, the work of staying when the loud thing is over. It is an ordinary Tuesday, nothing happening, nobody watching, and I am choosing to be patient with a tired woman when it would be easier not to be. And I have come to believe that this exact unglamorous moment, repeated 10,000 times, is the entire marriage. I have been thinking about why so many of the loud public marriages fall apart, and it has nothing to do with fame. It's that a lot of people are very good at the loud parts of a marriage and have never practiced the quiet parts. They're good at the wedding and the red carpet and the anniversary post. Those are performances, and performers are good at performances. What they have not practiced, because nobody can see it and nobody applauds it, is the Tuesday, the unglamorous, unphotographed, no cheering Tuesday, where the actual marriage either gets built or quietly does not. I got lucky, in a strange way, because my entire athletic life was rehearsal for the Tuesday. The games are won in the gym at 6 in the morning when no one is watching, running the boring drill 10,000 times until it goes automatic. That is exactly what a marriage is. It is the 10,000 boring mornings, the early alarms and the small kept promises, and the listening when you'd rather be sleeping, done when no one is clapping, until staying goes automatic, until choosing each other is no longer a decision you make but a muscle you've already built. This particular Tuesday, she came in short-tempered and tired, snapped at something that didn't deserve it, and I felt the old instinct rise, the one that wants to match it, to win the exchange. And I let it go by, the way you let a bad shot go by without forcing the next one. And I asked if she'd eaten, and the heat went out of the room, and 20 minutes later she set a hand on my shoulder on her way past, which is her whole apology in one gesture, and I took it, because I have learned to read it. So when people ask me the secret, I tell them the unromantic truth. There is no secret. There is only the work, done daily, when no one is watching. We chose each other on the loud days, sure, but we chose each other far more on the quiet ones, the ones where one of us was tired and short, and the other decided to be patient anyway. That is where the marriage truly lives, in the small, repeated mercy of two people choosing not to keep score on the days it would be easiest to. Chapter 29, Gabrielle, Unlearning the Armor. I am standing in front of my own bathroom mirror, undone, no joke coming, the day's performance entirely off, and I hear him in the next room, and I have a choice, the same choice I have every bad day, which is whether to put the face back on before he sees, or to let him walk in and find me exactly like this. Let me be honest about something, because the honesty might help somebody, and because pretending I arrived at peace easily would be the exact brand of polish I've spent this entire book confessing. The armor did not just fall off because I fell in love. That is the movie version, and it is a lie. Love only shows you every single day the exact shape of the armor you're still wearing, and then it waits to see if you'll choose to take it off, piece by piece, with your own hands. I did the work. The world likes to pretend a good marriage is something that happens to lucky people, and it is not. It is something two people build by each doing their own private, unglamorous, unfinished interior labor, and then bringing the slightly less armored version of themselves back to the same table again and again. I had to learn that needing someone is not the same as being weak. For a woman who built an entire self out of needing nothing from anyone, that was the hardest lesson of my adult life. I had to learn that letting my husband see me at my absolute worst, grieving, frightened, unfunny, undone, would not send him out the door, the way some old part of me was certain it would. So that day at the mirror, I did not put the face back on. He walked in and found me exactly as I was, raw and silent and nothing to perform. And he did the thing he always does, which is the opposite of what the old reflex swore would happen. He came closer. He didn't ask me to explain it or fix it or be funny about it. He just stood there with me in it, and the old voice that hissed, "Hide the real one," got, for one more day, a little quieter. I still have the reflex. I will always have it. On a bad day, I still feel for the side pocket, still glance at where the exit used to be. But I do not reach for it anymore. And the difference between having a reflex and obeying it is the entire difference between the woman I was and the woman I get to be. I am still the funniest one in the room. I just no longer need to be. In order to be safe and not needing to be is the freest I have ever been. Chapter 30. Dwyane, protecting the children from the loud world. A kid comes home from a bad day, slams a bag down, says nothing, and out beyond the walls of this house there are a million strangers who feel entitled to an opinion about that kid. And my whole job, the one I take more seriously than any defensive assignment I ever had, is to make sure not one of those strangers ever gets inside this door. There is a particular job that comes with raising a family in public, and it's the hardest part of the entire arrangement. The job is to keep the loud, opinionated, often cruel outside world from ever reaching the ordinary, private people at your table. Our children did not choose to be famous. They were simply born to two people the cameras follow, and that means strangers feel entitled to opinions about my kids, about how we raise them, about a transgender daughter who only wants to be herself, about a little girl whose side-eye went viral before she could walk. And my job is to stand between that noise and those children, so that inside our house, it's just a house. So that inside our walls, a kid can have a bad day, fail a test, lose a game, be in a foul mood for no reason at all, and be a regular, unfamous person, fully protected from the millions of strangers with opinions about a family they have never met. So when the kid came home and slammed the bag and said nothing, I did not ask what the internet would have asked. I asked what was for the kid alone. You eat? I said. You want to talk, or you want to not talk? And the kid chose not to talk, and I let that be allowed, because the rarest gift I can give a child of mine is a room where a bad day is just a bad day, not content, not a headline, not a thing the world gets to weigh in on. I learned this, like everything, from watching first. I learned to put my body between the noise and my kids, the same way you put your body between an opponent and the basket. You take the contact, so the people behind you don't have to. A father is a person who stands in front. My wife stands right there with me. And between the two of us, we have built a house with walls thick enough that, inside it, our children get to be ordinary. Not a famous life, a protected, ordinary one. Chapter 31. Gabrielle, the texture of an ordinary forever. It is a slow Saturday, nothing on the calendar, and he is on the floor again, losing again, to the 4-year-old and her invented game, drawing the loss out, the two of them howling, and I am watching from across the room with cold coffee I forgot to drink, and I understand all the way down that this is it. This is the whole thing. People ask me what a great marriage feels like, expecting me to describe something grand, and I always disappoint them, because the truth is plain, and I've stopped apologizing for it. A great marriage feels like texture. It is not a single grand feeling. It is 10,000 tiny, specific, repeated rituals that add up underneath you into a floor you can stand on. It is the way he can read across a crowded room whether I'm genuinely fine or performing fine, and adjusts without a word. It is the way he tastes the soup before he seasons it, which sounds like nothing and is, in fact, everything, because it means he checks before he assumes, in the kitchen and in the marriage. It is the running joke we've repeated so many times that the punchline is just a glance now, a private language only the two of us fully speak. He looks up from the floor, mid-defeat, and catches me watching, and he doesn't say anything, just gives me the look, and I give him the look back. And that whole exchange would be invisible to anybody else in the world and means, I see you, I'm here. Isn't this ridiculous? Isn't this everything? Not the gowns, not the banners. This. A man who once owned arenas, perfectly content to be ruled by a 4-year-old. A woman who was the only one in every room for 40 years. At last, permanently, not alone. Part 7. What We Know Now. Chapter 32. Dwyane, The Game Beneath the Game. Run the film back. There is a play, late in a game years ago, where I read the pass a full second before the man even decided to throw it, and I was already gone, already at the rim before the defense knew the ball had moved. And I want to tell you that exact half-second is the same half-second that let me love this particular woman. I want to go back to the court for a minute, not to brag, but because the way I played explains the way I love. I was never the biggest man on the floor or the fastest. What I had was harder to scout. I saw the play a half-second before it happened. I read the defense the way a person reads a room, and I slid into the space before the space had opened, so that by the time everybody else arrived, I was already gone. Plenty of men had the athletic part. Almost none of them had the watching. That is what made me, on my best nights, impossible to guard. And here is what I worked out, years later, off the court entirely. The watching is also what let me love her. She is a person who hides her most important feelings behind a joke, who hands you the polished one and keeps the real one sealed away. And a man who could not read a room would have taken the joke at face value and missed her completely. But I read rooms for a living. I watched her crack wise over the ring box with her eyes brimming, and I read, beneath the joke, the truth she could not say plainly, and I slid into that space before it fully opened. The skill that made me hard to guard is the same skill that let me find the real her behind all that armor. I did not have to be the strongest man in her life. I only had to be the one watching closely enough to hear what she was truly saying, and to get there a half-second early and wait for her in the space before she even knew she was heading for it. Chapter 33. Gabrielle, the platform, and the point of it. There is a girl in the audience at an event, 16 maybe, who came up to the rope afterward and could not get the words out, just held my hand and shook. And I knew without being told exactly what she had survived, because I survived it too. And right there, in that grip, is the answer to a question I spent decades getting wrong. I have spent 30 years building a platform, and let me say what I've decided it's for. For years, I thought the platform was the prize. You work, you claw, you survive every room, and the reward is that, in the end, people listen. But somewhere in my 40s, after I started telling the truth on the page, I understood that the platform is not the prize. The platform is the tool. It's what lets a woman who survived something terrible at 19 stand in front of a shaking 16-year-old at a rope line and say the sentence nobody said to her. It's what lets a bonus mom say out loud that a child you did not carry is fully your child. It's what lets two parents stand publicly beside a transgender daughter, so some other kid, watching from a hard house, sees that it's possible to be loved out loud. I held that girl's hand, and I told her the thing, the "it was not your fault" thing, the "you are not alone" thing, and I watched it land in her the way I have spent my life, wishing someone had made it land in me. And I thought, that is what all of it was for. The auditions and the rejections and the side pocket and the 30 years of rooms. All of it was just the long way around to being a person this girl could believe, because I had clearly been where she'd been and was somehow still standing here, telling her she would be too. That is what the fame is for, not the gowns. The point of being seen by millions is to turn around and use the seeing to make somebody who feels invisible feel found. I was the unseen one for most of my life, and I've made it my real job to make sure fewer people have to feel as alone as I once did. That is the platform. That is the point. Everything else is just the lighting. Chapter 34. Dwyane, watching the children become themselves. My oldest is grown now, standing in a doorway saying goodbye after a visit, car keys in his hand, his own life waiting out past the driveway. And I look at this whole young man and I realize how little of him I actually controlled. The strangest and best part of staying married a long time is that you get to watch the children become people, and it humbles you completely. My oldest survived having his family rearranged when he was a boy, and I held him together with bad jokes and steady routines and a refusal to let him see me afraid, and he came through it intact. My nephew, who I stood as guardian for, is a grown man too. Zaya is exactly, gloriously, who she always knew she was, out in the world being herself. And every time I see her at peace, in her own skin, I think, that right there is the championship. And the little one, the side eye, is coming up behind all of them, watching everything, missing nothing. So my oldest is in the doorway with his keys, and he hugs me on his way out the way grown sons hug their fathers, quick and a little embarrassed and entirely sincere, and tells me he'll call, and I watch the car back out of the drive, and I have to stand there a second and let it be what it is. I did not design that young man. I poured what I had into 1,000 ordinary days, and then I had to let go and trust the pouring soaked all the way down to the roots, where I cannot see it and cannot manage it. The banners I earned, the children I only got to tend, like a garden, and then stand back and watch grow into something I could never have designed, and love more than anything I ever did design. Chapter 35. Gabrielle, what I would tell the woman I was. Put me at a table across from her, the woman I was at that Super Bowl party, drink in hand, verdict already entered, exits already mapped, perfect record of reading every room, and give me 5 minutes, and watch her roll her eyes at me the entire time, because she is still me, and I still roll my eyes at sincerity. It is a reflex I will die with. Sometimes I think about that woman, the one deciding in advance that the quiet man was not her type, the one with the mapped exit and the zipped side pocket, and I think about what I'd tell her if I could sit her down. I would not tell her the man's name. She would not listen anyway. She had decided. I'd tell her something harder and more useful. I'd tell her the armor she's so proud of, the survival skills she built in the gymnasium and sharpened through a first marriage, kept her alive, and they are also, every single one of them, the exact wrong tools for the life she truly wants. Being undeniable is a fine way to survive a room and a terrible way to be loved in one. She'd roll her eyes at me. I know she would, but I'd say it anyway, slowly, so it had time to land. Put the armor down, I'd tell her. Let someone see you on the day you're not funny, the day the joke won't come and you have nothing left to perform. What you're guarding so carefully is not your safety. It's your life, and you're keeping it in a side pocket, and a side pocket is no place to keep a life. Take it out, set it on the table, Let the loud, crowded, imperfect house grow up around it. The exit you keep mapping is not safety. It's just loneliness you haven't met yet. I promise you, the day starts anyway. And she'd say something cutting, because I always have to get the last word, and I'd let her have it, because I know something she doesn't, which is that she's going to lose this argument eventually to a quiet man at a party she didn't want to attend, and it's going to be the best loss of her life. Chapter 36. Dwyane, down 2-0. 2-0 in the finals, my first one, the entire world already writing the ending, and I am sitting in a quiet locker room with the obituary of our season being typed in every press box in the country. And what I learn in the next 4 games I will need again, years later, in a place with no cameras at all. Let me tell you about the comeback, the famous one from 2006, because I've come to understand it was practice for something I didn't know I was going to need. We were down 2-0, and the world had stopped watching the games and started writing the eulogy, which is the thing about being down 2-0. The verdict comes in before the trial is over, and we won 4 straight. 4. I won't pretend I didn't play the basketball of my life in those games, and it's the part strangers still stop me about. But the lesson of that series was never really about basketball. It was that the story is not over when the world says it's over, that 2-0 is just a place you're standing on the way to somewhere else, if you refuse to accept that the standing place is the end. I did not know, in 2006, that I'd need that exact lesson in my own marriage a few years later, down 2-0, the world writing our ending. And I reached back for what the basketball had taught me, that a comeback is just a decision you make when the scoreboard says you have no right to make it. And we won 4 straight, in private, at home, with no cameras and no confetti. The only comeback I ever made with no banner. I have 2 of those, the public comeback and the private one. They will only ever know me for the first. I know which one was harder and which one I'm prouder of, and it is not the one with the trophy. Chapter 37. Gabrielle, how we fight and how we come back. We are mid-fight, a real one, and I have just found the line, the surgical one, the one that would end it in my favor, and it is sitting right there on my tongue, and I watch him not take the bait, watch him decline to escalate, and I realize that the entire discipline of staying married is happening in this exact 1 second, in whether I throw the line or swallow it. I'm going to tell you something true about us that ruins the fairy tale, because the fairy tale is useless to anyone, and the truth might actually help. We fight. Of course we fight. 2 strong-willed, ambitious, fully formed adults who each spent decades being the most capable person in every room do not melt into one frictionless unit just because they fell in love. And I am good at fighting, dangerously good, because I'm fast and funny, and I have a tongue honed to a blade, and I spent a lifetime learning to win the room. And early on that was a problem, because I knew how to win a fight, and I did not yet know how to repair one. Those are completely different skills, and almost nobody tells you that. Winning a fight is about being right and finding the line that ends it. Repairing one is about setting down the need to win, which for a woman who survived by being undeniable is like asking her to set down her own arm. So there's that 1 second, mid-fight, the line loaded. And across the room he just looks at me, not flinching, not arming up, declining the whole exchange, and I have to choose, in real time, with every old reflex screaming for the kill, whether I want to win this fight or stay married to this man, because in that second they are opposite things. I swallowed the line, not gracefully, not the first 100 times, but I swallowed it, and the room cooled, and an hour later he reached across the table for my hand, like the storm had never happened, and I let him. He taught me how to come back, not by out-arguing me. He's too smart to try. He taught me by example, by being the one who, after the worst of it, would let the silence soften, would wait until the heat had gone out of the room, and then reach for my hand like nothing had happened. And I learned, against every old reflex, to set the blade down first sometimes, to be the one who reaches back across the table, because I'd come to want the marriage more than I wanted to be right. And wanting the marriage more than being right is, as far as I can tell, the entire secret no one can sell you. You simply have to choose it on an ordinary afternoon when every cell in you would rather win. Chapter 38. Dwyane, the speech, and the morning after all of it. The morning after the Hall of Fame, and I am back in the only arena that ever truly mattered, which is the kitchen, on the floor, with a comb in my hand and a small, impatient head in front of me, beginning a braid. I already know I'm going to botch. Let me bring you back to where we started, because the kitchen is where this story lives and where it ends. The night before, I stood at that Hall of Fame podium in front of the entire basketball world, the boy from Robbins who won the loud thing early and spent the rest of his life learning the quiet one. I made my couple of nervous jokes, and then I told the truth, the same truth this entire book has been circling. The loud life made me famous. The quiet life made me whole. The arenas knew my name. Only a handful of people at one table truly know me, and they are the only ones whose knowing I'd still want when I'm old and the banners have gone dusty. And here is the morning after all of it. Spring, 2026. A guard no one can guard anymore sits on a sunlit floor with his daughter in front of him, ruling the room with a side-eye she earned honestly from both her parents. The dog flops down in the warm bar of light, and a father with championship hands begins a braid he already knows he'll botch and finishes it anyway, the two of them laughing, because the finishing is the love and the slightly crooked result is the trophy. She looks up from across the room, the funniest woman in any room, undefeated by every ordinary trial we've survived, and unimpressed by every famous feat I ever pulled off. It's crooked, she says. I know, I say. And that right there, the I know is the entire marriage in 2 words. I see it. I am not going to fix it. It is crooked, and it is ours, and I would not straighten it for anything on this earth. Chapter 39. Gabrielle, the answer she never got to give from a podium. The back step, the morning after the Hall of Fame, before anyone else is up, and the light is just coming over the hills, and I am out here alone with a cup of coffee I'm actually drinking for once, and I hear the door behind me, and a man the entire planet enshrined the night before sits down next to me and asks if I thought the speech was okay. He had his podium. I want mine, here, on the page, where nobody can play me off with music. When he stood up in front of the entire basketball world and said the loud life made him famous and the quiet life made him whole, I was sitting close enough to watch his hands shake, the same hands that never shook with a game on the line. And I thought, there he is. The world heard a retired athlete being gracious. I heard a man confessing the only secret he has in front of people who mostly came for the highlights. So here is my answer, the one I didn't get to give that night. For 30 years, I was the only one in a lot of rooms, and I learned the same lesson he did, in a different uniform. I learned that you can be wanted by an enormous number of people and known by almost none of them, that applause is a sound, not a relationship, and that you can starve to death inside it. I called it survival. It just was not living. And then I met a younger man at a party I didn't want to attend, and the maddening thing about him was that he refused to be performed for. I gave him every version that had kept me upright across a career, and he just watched me with that patient courtside stillness and waited for the real one. He was not impressed by the armor. He was interested in the woman wearing it. Do you have any idea how disarming that is? I did not fall in love with him because he completed me. I was complete, a terrified woman who'd built a fortress and learned to call it a home. I fell in love with him because he was the first person patient enough to knock instead of storm, and stubborn enough to keep knocking through the split, through the silence, through the year I do not narrate prettily, through every single time I tested whether he'd leave by acting like I wanted him to. He kept knocking. He just would not go away. And eventually I got tired in the best way, the way you get tired of holding your stomach in, and I let the fortress have a door. So there we are on the back step, and he asks me, this man, with a wall of trophies behind him, whether he did all right. And I understand, in that ordinary quiet, exactly what I married. Not a champion. A man who, having been told by the entire planet that he is great, still turns to one woman to find out whether it's true. It was perfect, I told him. It was not perfect. The middle ran long. He forgot to thank one person, and his tie had been crooked the whole night. Like everything in this house is a little crooked. But it was true. And after a lifetime of perfect and false, I've developed an allergy to perfect and a hunger for true. So I said perfect, and I meant true, and he knew the difference, because that's the language we invented together. Two people who spent their early lives being looked at and slowly taught each other the second thing. That is my answer. He got the podium. I got the man who asks me if the speech was okay. I would not trade. Chapter 40. Dwyane, what the children get to keep. There's a table, and there is an argument happening at it about whose turn it is to pick the music in the car, and it is loud and unresolved, and will never be resolved, and people ask me what I want my legacy to be, and the honest answer is sitting right here, arguing. They expect me to say something about basketball, the 3 titles or the number on the wall in Miami or the bronze in Springfield, and I tell them the truth, which is that the banners belong to a city, and the trophies belong to a shelf, and none of it is coming with me. What's coming with me, what I truly built, is at that table arguing about the music. I have 5 children, and not one of them arrived the simple way the brochures promise. There is my oldest, who walked his mother partway down the aisle at our wedding when he was a boy, and is a young man now, watchful in the way I recognize because he got it from me. There is the nephew we raised as our own, because family is something you do, not merely something you are born into. There is the son whose arrival in the hardest year of my marriage I've already told you about with all the restraint I owe everyone involved, a boy who is loved fully, without an asterisk. There is our daughter who came to us through a surrogate after years of loss. I will not dress up, a tiny person with a side eye so devastating the internet adopted her. And there is my child who, a few years ago, sat us down and told us who she truly is. That last one is the legacy, not because she's the most important child, none of them is, do not start, but because of what it asked of me. When your child tells you who they are, you discover in about 4 seconds what you truly believe, as opposed to what you say you believe. There is only a kid in front of you, watching your face for the flicker, the half-second hesitation that would teach her she's safe to be loved only if she shrinks. And the honest answer is that the choice was not hard at all, because her mother and I had spent a decade learning to put a person ahead of being right. So we love her out loud, on purpose, where people can see, not because we need an audience, but because somewhere there is another kid watching a father who had every reason to be the old kind of man choose, in public, to be a new kind instead, and that kid needs to see it's possible. That is what the children get to keep, not the name on the jersey, the memory of two people who were terrified, who came from hard places, who got famous and stayed scared, and who decided anyway to build a table where every single one of them is wanted exactly as they are. The certainty, soaked all the way down, that they were loved before they did anything to deserve it, and would be loved if they never did anything at all. That is the inheritance. Everything else is just press. Chapter 41. Gabrielle, on the 3 years we were only friends. A young woman corners me at an event, eyes shining, and asks me to tell her the meet cute, the crowded party, the quiet smile, the whole Hollywood machinery of how we met. And I tell her gently that she's asking about the wrong part, because the meet cute is not the love story, and watch her face fall a little, because nobody wants to hear what I'm about to say. The love story is the 3 years afterward, the long, unglamorous stretch when we were only friends, the part that saved us, the part no one puts in the magazines because there's no kiss in it. For 3 years, I knew this man with no agenda attached, no courtship pressure, no performance, no audition energy. We were just two people who kept turning up in each other's lives, talking, telling the truth, watching each other move through other seasons, other people, other disappointments. And in those 3 years, something happened that had never happened to me before in my adult life. A man got to know me before he got to want me. You have to understand what a gift that is to a woman who'd spent her entire life being wanted first and known never. Being wanted is loud and fast and feels, for about a week, like love. Being known is slow and quiet and feels, for a long time, like nothing at all, like friendship, like only talking. And then one day you look up and realize this person holds the whole map of you and did not run. He had me memorized before he ever had me at all. So when we eventually became more, there was no version of me left to discover and be let down by. That is why I could finally let the fortress have a door. I tell young women this and they look at me like I'm stalling. They want the spark, the chemistry, the immediate. And the spark is wonderful. The spark photographs beautifully. But the spark is not load-bearing. You cannot build a 30-year house on a spark. You build it on the boring beams, the friendship beams, the I knew you before I loved you beams, the ones that hold the roof up on the days the spark has gone to bed early with a headache. We had 3 years of beams before we lit a match, and that is the only reason the house still stands. So no, the party is not the story. The 3 years of just talking is the story. I married my friend, the one man who bothered to know me first. Put that in the magazine. Chapter 42. Dwyane, the arena I actually trained for. A young man, early in his own career, asks me what the secret was, how I trained, what the arena demanded, certain that the arena is the destination. And I look at this kid who is exactly where I was at his age, and I tell him the truth I learned the hard way, which is that the arena was never the destination. The arena was the rehearsal. For 20 years, I trained my body for arenas, the early mornings, the cold tubs, the film, the thousands of jump shots in empty gyms, the discipline people clap for. And I want to tell the young men who are where I was the truth. The arena was me practicing discipline on something that did not matter nearly as much as what it was preparing me for, which was a home, a marriage, and 5 children who needed a different kind of man. The arena rewards a certain masculinity: dominate, never show the wound, win at all costs, take the last shot and live with the miss alone. That masculinity made me rich and famous, and it nearly made me useless at the only job that finally mattered. You cannot dominate your way into your daughter's trust. You cannot take the last shot alone in a family, because the entire point of a family is that no one takes the shot alone. Everything the arena taught me about being a man, I had to gently, stubbornly unlearn at home. And the unlearning was harder than any training camp, because there was no off-season and no trophy, only a quiet, patient woman and a handful of kids watching to see which man was going to show up. I think about my sons constantly, about what I'm modeling, because a boy learns what a man is by watching one. So I let them see me lose on purpose, come in second, and shake it off without sulking. I let them see me apologize, which the arena never taught me, see me wrong and admit it, see me afraid and not hide it. The new kind of man, the kind I want them to be, is not the one who never falls. It is the one who lets people see him fall and get back up without pretending he was never down. And the body. No one warns you about the body. For 20 years, it was the most dependable instrument I owned, and now it is a ledger of everything I asked. The knees keep the receipts. The mornings come slower. There is a humility in a great athlete's aging body that is good for the soul, a daily reminder that the body was always a lease and never a deed. The hands still work, though. The hands can still do the one task that matters now. Gentle on a small, impatient head, the championship hands learning their final and most important skill, which is tenderness towards someone who will never know or care how high they once rose. That is the arena I actually trained for, the home. I just did not know it for the first half of my life. The trophies were the warm-up. This was always the game. Chapter 43. Gabrielle, the maintenance nobody photographs. A small, quiet room, 2 chairs, a third person whose entire job is to help 2 stubborn people say the hard, true things out loud in the one place where the hard, true things cannot end the marriage. And we are in those chairs, and this, the part no camera will ever be allowed near, is where the marriage actually gets kept. Here is what no one tells you about a marriage that lasts, and it's the least romantic sentence in this entire book, so brace yourself. It is maintenance. It is the same unglamorous tending, over and over, that no one photographs and no one applauds, and no one cuts into a highlight reel. The daily quiet labor of 2 people choosing to keep the marriage running, the way you keep anything running that you intend to depend on for the rest of your life, by tending it long before it ever breaks. We do the work the wedding photos never show. We have sat across from people whose job is to help us say the hard truths in a room where the hard truths cannot end the marriage. I will not pretend we figured it out alone through the sheer force of love, because that is the lie that strands so many people. The lie that if it's real love, you shouldn't have to work at it. Real love is precisely what you work at. We worked, we still work, on an ordinary day, when neither of us feels like it. And I want to say something to the women specifically, the ones who came up the way I came up, undeniable and armored and a little bit alone inside the success. You do not have to dismantle yourself to be loved. That was my great fear, that the price of being truly known would be the armor that kept me alive. That is not what happened. I did not get smaller. I got a door. The armor is still mine. I can put it on in 2 seconds in a hostile room, and that woman saved my life. What changed is that I learned there is one home, one table, where I do not have to wear it, where the watcher is watching for me instead of against me. And a woman who has even one such room in the world is rich, no matter what else is true. So that is the maintenance. The therapy nobody photographs. The apology nobody applauds. The choosing, on the gray, ordinary days, to stay tender with the one person who earned it. The way he reads my silence and decides, correctly, whether to fill it or leave it alone. The slightly crooked braid he gives our daughter, which I'll tease him about out loud and treasure in silence. The long-running argument about the puzzle on the counter, which neither of us will finish, and neither will let the other throw away. This is the marriage, not the gowns, and the willingness to do the boring tending, joyfully, for decades, with no audience, is the truest and rarest form of love there is. Epilogue. The kitchen, which is where we started and where we stay. Gabrielle, if you came to this book for the famous parts, I hope you stayed for the boring ones, because the boring ones are the marriage. The red carpets photograph beautifully and mean almost nothing. The Tuesday mornings photograph terribly and mean everything. Anyone can love you under good lighting. The entire question of a life is who is still there when the lighting is only a kitchen window and you have nothing to offer the day except the unperformed, ordinary fact of yourself. Being looked at made me successful and lonely. Being seen made me terrified. And then, slowly, over years, I did not always handle gracefully. Free. The man who did the seeing was younger and quieter, and more patient than I deserved in all the years I spent testing whether he would stay. He stayed, not dramatically. He simply kept choosing the table every ordinary morning until at last I believed it. Dwyane. I won the loud thing early, and I want to be honest about how little it ultimately weighed. The night we won my first championship, I was a young man on top of the entire world, and I went back to a quiet room and felt the strangest sensation of my life, which was that the feeling I'd chased since I was a boy had a bottom to it, and I'd hit it, and there was still all this life left over that the trophy did not touch. It took me years and one stubborn, funny, guarded woman to understand what the leftover life was for. It was for this. The braid I cannot do well, the dog asleep in the sun. Two formerly untouchable people arguing softly about nothing across a quiet morning and meaning I love you the whole time. Gabrielle. People want a secret. After all of it, the loss and the split, and the year I do not pretty up, the surrogacy and the miscarriages I will not minimize, the blended and chosen family we built with no instructions. Here is the only secret I have, and it is not for sale, which is exactly why no one markets it. Stay. Not stay no matter what. I am not talking about staying somewhere that diminishes you. I walked out of a marriage once and saved my own life doing it. I mean, when you have found the rare person who knocks instead of storms, and waits instead of grabs, and wants the real you instead of the performed one, stay through the unglamorous middle. Stay on the Tuesday. Stay when winning the fight is right there in your hand, and you set it down anyway. Stay long enough to discover that the ordinary life you were almost too important to want is the only thing that was ever going to make you whole. Dwyane. So that is us. A guard who learned to watch first and trust second. An actress who learned that the armor was never the same as the home. Two people who came from hard places, got famous, stayed scared, and decided anyway to build one good table and keep every chair around it filled with people we love out loud. And we will be exactly here, in a sunlit house in the hills, an old man one day with championship hands attempting a braid, an old woman telling him it came out crooked, the both of us laughing, because the crooked part was always the trophy, and the staying was always the win. She tells me it came out crooked. I know, baby, I know. And we leave it. Author's note. This book is a work of dramatized biography written by Barron as part of the Books by Barron Love Stories series. It was inspired by the real, publicly documented love story of Dwyane Wade and Gabrielle Union, two people who have lived an unusually large portion of their lives in public, and who have, to their lasting credit, chosen to be honest in that public eye about marriage, blended family, loss, identity, and the work of staying. The framework of this story is drawn from the public record, the major dates, places, and milestones, how and roughly when they met, the years of friendship and the period apart, the proposal and the 2014 wedding, his championships and Hall of Fame enshrinement, and the businesses that followed his playing career, her 3 decades of work, and her memoirs, and her advocacy, and the children who make up their family, including the path to their youngest daughter, and their proud public support of their child who came out. These are matters they have spoken about themselves, in interviews, in their own published books, and in their own words, and I have tried to honor the spirit of what they have shared. Everything else, the interior monologues, the private dialogue, the kitchen scenes, the staged moments, and specific gestures, the feelings I have placed inside their heads, is dramatized. It is imagined. No one handed me a transcript of a private morning. I was not in that room, where I have written a real person thinking or speaking. That thinking and speaking is my respectful invention in service of a love story, not a quotation and not a claim of fact. Readers should treat the emotional interior of this book as fiction built on a true and admirable foundation, and should go to Dwyane Wade and Gabrielle Union's own words for the literal account of their lives. I wrote this with affection and respect for both of them, and for everyone who's ever discovered that the loud life and the whole life are not the same life, and chosen the second at a kitchen table on an ordinary Tuesday. Narration by Jessica Ann Bogart.